I would like to introduce our moderator for today, who in turn will then introduce our panelists as he take over the session. Our moderator is John Dowse, who is a Senior Managing Director with Ankura Consulting Group. Possessing qualifications in both construction and law, John has some 40 years of industry and consulting experience gained in regions as diverse as the UK, Europe, the Middle East, the Caribbean, and North America, and in the procurement and delivery of complex construction projects up to several $1 billion in value. So everyone would have been sent a copy of the agenda. In fact, I will put it in the chat for you as well, so you'll get detailed information on the background of everyone. I'm just happy to say John has worked in the region, has been based here in Trinidad and Tobago, where he spent some 11 years or so supporting work in the Caribbean region. And now he works out of Toronto, Canada. John has been a past panelist for sessions here at CCGI, and he's someone whose expertise we tremendously value. And I'm very happy that he has agreed to be our moderator for today's panel discussion. John, I welcome you to the virtual microphone and pass over today's session to you.
Thank you very much, Kamla. It's a pleasure to be here today to moderate this panel discussion, which I think is going to be very lively over the next couple of hours. Excuse me. I think I've caught Kamla's cough in the last few minutes, so please excuse me. The subject of today's discussion is Getting Construction Right, Recommendations from the Uff Report. It falls under the CCGI's procurement series of lectures, but when we are talking about procurement in this context, we're talking not only about the legal act of forming contracts to procure, to develop assets and to gain assets, but we're talking about the delivery methods as well. And the report, which is colloquially known as the Uff Report, was a report into the construction sector of Trinidad and Tobago. It was in 2010. I was in Trinidad both for a few years before that and for 10 years after the report. So, and I actually had personal involvement in some of the projects which the Commission of Inquiry considered. It was a wide-ranging report. It made 91 recommendations as to how the industry might review its own practices with the hopes of development and of implementing international standards of practice, serving the industry, bringing integrity to the industry, to raise public confidence in the way that government money was spent as well. Joining me today, I'm excited to have three prominent industry guests. Firstly, we have Mr. Adesh Surujnath. Adesh is currently the head of Civil Projects Division at Trintoplan Consultants in Trinidad and Tobago. He has approximately 27 years of experience in both civil and geotechnical engineering projects, including various types of civil engineering projects covering infrastructure development and industrial projects. His involvement in projects includes the supervision of the construction of civil and structural works in a new ammonia plant, construction of road infrastructure, field drilling geotechnical operations, laboratory testing, including soils, concrete and asphalt, and in carrying out engineering analyses and writing design reports. Prior to his work at Trintoplan, Adesh also carried out structural design and review of structural designs for a number of buildings. Adesh, welcome to today's panel. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Derek Outridge. Derek is a chartered surveyor, an RICS registered valuer, attorney at law, arbitrator, registered mediator, and a part-time senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Trinidad campus. Derek has over 42 years of experience in the construction industries of Trinidad and Tobago, the United Kingdom, and the Caribbean region. He is extremely academically qualified as well as professionally and practically qualified. Derek obtained his Bachelor of Science in Quantity Surveying. He is a professional associate of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. He's a full member of the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago, a project management professional with the Project Management Institute in the US. He holds a Master of Philosophy degree in Surveying and Land Information. He's a fellow of the Quantity Surveyors Institute in the United Kingdom, holds a postgraduate diploma of law from the University of Huddersfield, is an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, holds a postgraduate certificate in professional legal practice. I became tongue-tied there, my apologies. Holds a certificate of enrollment and is an attorney at law in the Trinidad and Tobago Bar. He is a member of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, a certified non-family mediator with the Mediation Board of Trinidad and Tobago, and an honorary member of the Construction Management Institution of Trinidad and Tobago. Derek, welcome to today's panel. We look forward to hearing from you. Our third panelist, who I have recently had the opportunity of speaking with and also watching some of his broadcasts on live feed TV, is Dr. Don Samuel. Don has 21 years of industry experience, including 11 years at senior management level. His expertise is in the fields of construction procurement, project management, construction management, and facilities management. He's managed some 200 civil engineering projects with a net value of over 500 million TT dollars, over 73 million US dollars. Past responsibilities have included design, construction, and maintenance of buildings, drainage systems, sewer systems, major roads, highways, residential and development, civil engineering infrastructure. And his current responsibilities include facilities management of the University of Trinidad and Tobago's, the University of the West Indies, 70 buildings, 60 houses, and 6 satellite sites. He's lectured for 4 years in the MBA program for the Australian Institute of Business and has 13 years of research experience. His current ResearchGate interest score is 27.1 with 3,796 reads of 6 articles, 5 published and 1 unpublished. He has a number of citations and recommendations also. Academically, Don holds a bachelor degree in civil engineering, a master's degree in construction management, and a doctorate in construction management. He's a professional member of the Project Management Institute, the Institution of Civil Engineers and Chartered Management Institute, and is licensed to practice civil engineering in Trinidad and Tobago and the United Kingdom. He's currently tenured also with the University of the West Indies. Don, welcome to the panel. We look forward to hearing from you. Today, we would like to make this discussion interactive as well. It's not just here for the panel to give their opinions on the industry. We're not intending to be critical of any aspect of the industry. This is to promote development in the section of both government procurement and the process of delivery of every capital expenditure project. We'd like to hear from you, the audience. We'd like you to post questions in the chat room if you can. I will be monitoring that as we go through. And also, if you have questions which you'd like to ask live, on air, as it were, then please, as Kamla has indicated, put your hand up and we will take your question then. There will be a question and answer session at the end, but any questions that you want to raise beforehand, we're welcome to hear them, and I'll certainly try and incorporate them. To kick off, I'd like to ask a question, and this is open. I'll let each panelist speak to it on each of the first 2 points I have to raise, and I'll let them speak individually. My first point, though, my first question is, the Uff Report from 2010 was commissioned at a time when there was significant publicity over the performance of the procurement and delivery of a number of high-profile government-sponsored projects. In short, the projects were perceived as failing for a number of reasons. The Scarborough Hospital and the Brian Lara Stadium projects were just two of many projects considered. Now we're 13 years on since the Commission of Inquiry report, and there have been a number of other high-profile projects which have drawn significant attention in the media and in the courts. Question I'd like to ask the panel, and we will kick off with Adesh if we can, please. Does the panel consider that anything has changed since the publication of the Commission of Inquiry report, the Uff Report? Adesh, over to you, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. In terms of anything has changed, I would say there have been some implementation of some of the recommendations. One of them was, I think, just to give an example, state enterprises are holding their contractors and their consultants to a greater level of accountability, in that where there are errors, let's say if it was errors on the consultant part, certain state enterprises are enforcing some sort of damages on the consultant, and in the same vein, in terms of the construction, where the contractor has gone past the established time for completion, the state enterprises are ensuring that they're enforcing the delay damages clause in the conditions of the contract. That is basically, when I went through the Uff report in terms of the recommendations, that's the main thing I would have seen that has changed. But a lot of the other recommendations, there has been very little progression in implementing those recommendations.
Thank you. Derek, anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And John, I'm very happy to see that we have decided to make the theme getting construction right. There have been, I have looked at the 91 recommendations in the Uff inquiry. And we have had research students at the University of the West Indies investigate significantly into several of these recommendations. And we have two researchers who actually took all of the 91 recommendations and classified them into 17 categories. And, you know, in respect of whether there's been improvement in designs, no, I didn't see any. Whether there's been any improvement in construction oversight, in fact, there's less construction oversight by independent consultants. Whether there's been any improvements in construction project management, I've not seen any. Whether there's been improvement with the statutory authorities in terms of giving approvals prior to construction start, there has been some aspects of that, and that is driven by virtue of people having to get a CEC before construction, and then town and country planning granting the authority, and everything else happening after that. Whether there's been value for money, no, I'm not seeing that. There less involvement of the cost consultant in the aspects of getting value for money. You know, there's been a significant amount of waste still happening on the construction project. Whether there's been any improvement in procurement, well, I will leave that to Don, because the Procurement Act, it hasn't yet been put into effect. But hopefully it's heading there, right? The bonds and insurances, yes, they are in place now. You know, site matters, I am seeing more and more site investigations being requested, and that's a very good thing, right? Key performance indices for construction project success, I am not seeing that. That is not being done by the state organizations. Dispute resolution, there's been some movement in dispute resolution. I am not of the view that it has gone anywhere, because there's been no revision to the arbitration laws. You know, there has been some movements to mediation. There's nothing on statutory adjudication. So we haven't gone anywhere with that. Corruption, there is no improvement in corruption. transparency, I am not of the view that we're transparent without good procurement legislation. Delay damages, and I agree with Adesh, there has been some improvement in that. Contractor selection, it still has not improved. Stakeholder involvement on the projects, there have been some improvement with stakeholder consultation as a virtue of the CEC. And the last one, local content. Well, there is local content in the energy sector, but I'm not seeing a significant amount in the construction sector. And those are the 17 categories that I have said that was categorized, and I've addressed it like that.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. Don, both Adesh and Derek seem to be indicating that there has been movement, but it's baby steps at the moment. I'm aware that you are a strong advocate of procurement legislation leading the way on this. Are we going to, can you give a comment on your perspective at the moment, recognizing that the government has taken steps towards enactment, but hasn't yet been so brave as to publicly enact the bill? Is it something which is needed? Is it or should the industry be driven at ground level by the practitioners within the industry as well? Your comments, please, your thoughts.
Yes, thank you, John, and thank you, Adesh and Derek. I mean, I always call this team of Don, Adesh, and Derek as the Avengers team of the industry. And the reason why we call ourselves that is because we've been advocating, as he rightly said, for quite a long time. I think Derek has been in it more than all of us, and I totally support what both Adesh and Derek is saying as the characterization of the industry at this point in time. The issues, so I'm not going to repeat anything that I said. I guess we'll discuss it and we'll dovetail into it as we go along. But what I want to highlight in the procurement side, and I will say that I'm an advocate for construction procurement, because I'm not an expert in all procurement. So, I need to declare that. So as an advocate for construction procurement, I have 5 concerns. And the first of that is the fact at this point in time, we don't have a procurement regulator appointed. And I know the regulator well. He's a very upstanding person. And I think that his contract probably was not renewed in January. And since then, we have not seen a procurement regulator. So I'm wondering what is going to happen between that time and when they do appoint one. So that's one. Then, of course, as you alluded to, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act has not been yet proclaimed by the president. Well, the last one, I know we have a new president, and I think we all know the issues around that, so I'm not going to delve into too much of that. But what I would say is, and it's something to dovetail off of Derek's comment, is that where's the oversight? Okay, one of the things that the Uff Report recommended. So I have to be fair that some things, as Adesh and Derek is saying, some things have been done, but a lot still needs to be done. And the question is that you asked was who should drive it? And I am all for the industry driving it. I'm not hearing too many of the industry advocates come out and say, here's what we need to improve ourselves. And when a few of them do, including Adesh, Derek, and myself, seem to fall on their face. Something else that is very particular concern to me in procurement is that, last year the Integrity Commission indicated that there were about over 1,000 ex parte applications made to the High Court for persons who did not file declarations. This is very important from the standpoint of transparency. If persons are serving as directors and they don't declare, and then it could be a suspicious nature of their operations, and we don't want to single out anybody, as we say. But this is very significant, and wonder how could oversight happen. In terms of value for money, which both Derek and Adesh spoke about, some of the simplest things we've been taught in the construction degrees, whether the bachelor's, master's, or the doctorate level, is that where's the feasibility studies for projects? Because it seems to be that projects are being executed political expediency, and I don't want to get too much into it, obviously. I'm mindful of that people vote one way or the other, but we need to do projects based on feasibility and not for political expediency. So in terms of, as I say, I'm an advocate for construction procurement. I mean, I just making a little plug here. My research had to do with coming up with a new tender evaluation tool, which I'm currently testing in industry. So I mean, data has always been slow for this type of research. So when I ask persons, some persons will give me data, some persons are resistant to give data. And Derek spoke about that. He has supervised research students who have done a lot of good work, a lot of good research, but we need to take the research and get it into the actual governance of the country, because then what's the point of the research? So there's more I could say, but I want to just be mindful of time and respectful of my colleagues and so on. So I'll hold for there now.
That's a great introduction. Thank you, Don. It leads me to my next point. The Uff report, the Commission of Inquiry report, call it as you will, did make a number of recommendations, and those recommendations were directed variously towards the government, the state-owned enterprises through which the government procures capital expenditure projects, and the industry at large, the contractors, the suppliers, the consultants, the consultant organizations, the professional organizations as well. If you were to pick 5, and whilst you're on camera, Don, we'll stick with you for this and then move back to our colleagues. If you were to pick 5 issues from the Uff report, which you think should be a priority to be addressed, which would those be?
Sure, thank you very much for that consideration. Well, let's go with recommendation number 1. Recommendation 1, and I'm quoting directly, is money assigned for public construction projects must not be allowed to be corruptly diverted and therefore stolen from the public. Now, bear in mind that there's an amendment. If you go to the Parliament website of Trintoplan and you go into Bill Essentials, you'll see that they talk about Clause 5, amend Section 7 of the Act. And this caused great debate and discourse in the public eye, that the Act shall not apply to public bodies who are in legal services, financial, accounting, auditing, medical. And the last one, which is of great concern, such other services as the minister may by order determine. So that is the act. That, to me, my opinion on that is that it violates the first recommendation, because then the minister, anyone, they don't say which minister, but I'm assuming it's the Minister of Finance. The minister may very well say, here's what, this project, we're not going to apply the act to it. And it was within his right to do it once the recommendation, once the amendment is proclaimed. Sorry, once the whole bill in entirety is proclaimed. So that's point number 1 for me, one of the first recommendations, and you're asking for 5. Let's go to recommendation number 2. Management roles should be performed only by experienced persons who should be motivated to take positive and proactive decisions and to take the initiative when the project so demands. Both Adesh and Derek alluded to it, there are allegations in the public eye. I'm not going to call any names of any state agencies, obviously, where and you always see it on the social media, you know, the typical comment of square pegs in a round hole, right? That's the balance that we use here. But there have been allegations that inexperienced, unqualified persons are being hired to undertake procurement management, contract management, and so on. Now, of course, both universities, University of West Indies, University of Trintoplan, we are producing graduates. So when I see this is happening, why are we not getting the right people to make the right decisions at the right time? That's a statement I always use. Get the right people to make the right decisions at the right time. So that is point number 2. And okay, let me just get to the third point, which one of these was right. So then let's go back to recommendation 8. Value for money requires that projects should be performed efficiently by all parties in accordance with their contractual duties and professional skill. And so I think Derek also talked about this value for money. So that's why I made a call for feasibility studies, the return of these, to ensure that all our major capital investments are not dictated by someone waking up one morning and say, here's what we need a highway. I just say, what is the feasibility like? Have we considered the environmental implications, the social impact, and so on? These things are very important. So value for money is something we need to definitely consider as part of recommendation 8. So I think I covered 3 recommendations. Let me cover 2 more. 11, recommendation 11. Local contractors and consultants must be prepared to adopt a flexible approach to acquire new expertise and skills with a view to delivering value for money by whatever procurement method the client may choose. Now, I am one that advocates, just like Derek and Adesh, for local content. I believe that we have expert engineers, contractors, quantity surveyors, architects, financial person, project managers. We have them in the country. We have, I always say West Indies or Caribbean people are bright. We are intelligent, so we have them. I think the only time we need to bring in expertise is when we don't have that particular expertise and not bring them in all the time, because one of the things that happen when you bring in foreign consultants or foreign contractors, what do? They hire the local contractors and local consultants to do all the legwork, and then they are paid. So the money, I mean, if you're looking at value for money and local content, we need to look at that in respect of that recommendation. I think I covered 4. The final one is rules requiring, this is recommendation 14 here. Rules requiring signed or formal contract should either be enforced or amended, not ignored. This is actually boils down to some personal ethics. I saw recently, and again, I have to be respectful in the room. I saw there was an allegation in the media that a particular contract was awarded and they ignored the requirement of having a CEC, okay? And when you look at the designated order activities of the EMA Act, that project necessitated a CEC. So this is an ethical issue. Why, if it is built in the contract, why are we ignoring systems that have been put in place to ensure that we get value for money? So I stop at this point again. Thank you for the consideration, and on to the other colleagues.
Thank you. Yeah, some very interesting points, which it certainly in my mind, it's sparking a lot of questions. Adesh, would you like to give 5 points as well? Which would you consider are the most high priority issues that should be addressed, recognizing that this is a people industry as well?
That's a very difficult question, but the 5 that it was a difficult choice. I mean, I was kind of on the fence with some of what Don had mentioned there. But if I have to pick 5, mine would be the recommendation number 5: planning authorities and utility companies should reduce their response times to a minimum. Attention should be given to coordinating the range of regulatory approvals required with a view to motivating developers to obtain all such content before starting work. Again, I think that's a problem we have locally in terms of getting the required approvals from the relevant statutory and regulatory agencies. And again, it comes back to are those agencies properly staffed? Do they have the competent personnel to do these reviews and to do these approvals? These are some of the questions that need to be answered. We also have to look at they're talking about with a view to motivating developers to obtain all such consents before starting work. But what are the penalties? What I don't see locally is that you're getting these whatever penalties are there that they're being enforced. We don't see that locally. I mean, there are some state-owned projects that they start construction without they're getting their own all the approvals in place. I mean, they're basically violating their own rules. So that's one of those. That's one point that that I would put we need to pay attention to. The second one is again is a kind of bridge is a bridge with the local content. So recommendation 10: the employment of foreign contractors and consultants, when appropriate, should be accompanied by appropriate programs for training of local personnel, both in construction techniques and extending into design and management issues, particularly concerning design build procurement. My place of employment, when I speak to the older heads, and they tell me about the large scale project that was undertaken in the country in the 1970s and 1980s. They told me that there was some level of technology transfer between the foreign consultants, the foreign contractors, and the locals. But since then, in the 90s and the 2000s, we're not seeing that. We're seeing these the employment of these foreign contractors, these foreign consultants, and again, they give the local consultants, as Don Don had said some of the dog work to do, right? And then then they basically get the credit for basically everything, and there's no they come and they go, and you don't get that skill set, the locals having the skill set that when the foreigners came down with whatever skill set that they have that they couldn't source locally, you don't get that transfer to the locals, so that for future projects of a similar nature, we could look at the local consultants, the local contractors to undertake it. My next one would be recommendation 20, which is there should be an assumption wherever contractual obligations are taken on that the parties will be held to account for any non-performance of such obligation. This should include enforcement of any additional sums payable to the contractor and the payment of damages by the contractor for any culpable delay. Any such claims on either side should be properly formulated before being settled, if possible, by amicable means. Again, it comes back to that you have some obligation to ensure that you fulfill the terms and conditions of your contract. And if you don't do that, there are penalties, and these penalties will be applied. It applies to consultants, it applies to contractors. It should, and again, it also should apply to the state enterprises. One example would be if the state enterprise, if they don't pay the contractors on time, what's the penalty there? Under the FIDIC Red Book, there are provisions for late payments, but from what I have seen recently in a particular state enterprise, they have deleted that clause. They expect the contractors that if they get paid late, there's no penalty to the employer. So basically, the employer can pay the contractor late, and then the contractor has to finance the project basically, and there's no recourse that the contractor can take against the employer. I think that's a very unfair position that that particular state enterprise has taken, and I expressed my view on that to the state enterprise when I read the particular clause. So that's 20. The next one would be recommendation 37. Let me just read that one out for the benefit of everyone. Sorry about that. 37. Procurement rules applying to government agencies in the field of construction should in general be the same. Agencies applying different procurement rules should either justify any differences or take steps to adopt uniform rules. The Ministry of Finance should renew its efforts to achieve uniform procurement rules for all government agencies undertaking construction operations. Just to give an example, again, you have NIDCO having different procurement rules, the UDECOT having different procurement rules, the Education Facilities Company Limited. Again, you have all these state enterprises undertaking these large-scale projects on behalf of the government. And they have basically different procurement rules. I think this is something that they could basically standardize. That's something that we need to really look into. And the last one would be recommendation number 39. The reviewing of tenders and the making of decisions upon the award of contracts should be undertaken in as transparent a manner as possible, including demonstrating clear compliance with procurement rules so as to allay suspicion of improper action or potential corrupt influences. Just from my personal experience, I mean, I was dealing with a contractor, and our client had indicated that they wanted to ensure we do contractor performance evaluation. And again, I did evaluation, and the contractor got a poor score. And I know he was on another project with another consultant. I know that other consultant gave him a poor score. And yet, a short while after, this contractor was awarded a major infrastructure development project by the same client. I mean, I can't understand how they didn't take those poor scores into account in awarding this contract. And as far as I understand, the project which was supposed to finish, well, this new project that the contractor was awarded, which was supposed to finish a while back, is still ongoing. So obviously, contractor's performance is still not good on that new project. I mean, that's something that I think we need to address. I mean, how did that contractor get that major project? And that project was much bigger than the project that where I and the other consultant, where we did evaluation of this contractor on. That's a problem that we need to address. I wish you had given me more than a 5, but if I had to limit it to 5, those 5, I would pick.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can certainly appreciate why you say you would like to talk about more than 5. There was a lot there, and I think to try and get a flavor of what is, as professionals, as high-level professionals with the industry, I deliberately set it at 5 so that the audience could also have a feeling for what areas were of greatest concern for you as leading professionals in the industry. Derek, we've heard experience, value for money, contractor expertise and local content, formal contracts, sticking to the rules, planning approvals, technology and training transfer, accountability. What else would you like to add to that list? It covers many, many aspects of the procurement and delivery process. What other issues would you like to see addressed as a matter of urgency?
Well, John, I have taken my own personal aspects out of this. I'm looking at research that has been done based on scientific data by masters in construction management students at the University West Indies who have produced distinction theses. And I have 2 in particular. One that was done on the contractor side, you know, in terms of what the contractors ranked as their top 10 problems. And one that was done on the employer side, in which the employers ranked what their top 10. Now, from the 91 recommendations in the Uff inquiry, both researchers reduced the categories of those recommendations into one researcher using 43 categories and the other one 54 categories, using the same category classification that is internationally recognized, as I mentioned before. Now, 42 of the 91 recommendations made by Professor Uff are in the top 10. But I have selected the top 5 that both the employers and the contractors combined have ranked, you know, as the top 5. And I'll tell you the first one, and no surprise to me, it's inadequate project definition or project scope or poor briefing. Now, we all know Oxford University has done a lot of research on this over a period of since the 1980s, and it's still the #1 problem in poor project performance, and that is recommendation number 3 in the Uff. There must be proper definition of the tasks and functions to be undertaken by project managers. Where separate roles are to be performed by different managers, there must be clear delineation between the functions of different parties so that they neither conflict nor overlap. So that's the first one, that both employers and the employers ranked that as #1. Funny enough, it's the employers who are ranking #1 poor project definition, who are the ones that are supposed to produce a proper project definition. And contractors have ranked poor project definition as the #2 problem they have. Their #1 was adverse weather conditions. I'm not surprised. But their #2 is poor project definition. So it shows that there's inadequate briefing, inadequate preparation at the planning stage. At the planning stage of a project before it hits the ground. And we know why that happens, John. It happens because everybody wants to go and turn the sod and say the project has started. And we all know that construction projects is not like baking bread. You just put everything together, give it a knead, swell up enough 20 minutes, you put it in the oven, and whoops, we are bread in 30 to 45 minutes. That's what they're trying to do in construction projects in Trinidad all this time. And that's not how construction projects run. Construction project requires time, requires proper planning. If we don't proper plan, we waste taxpayers' funds because more money is spent during the construction with the contractor having to stand up and wait for project information. And that's where all the claims and the monies, anyway, I'm not going where for the reasons why. But the second significant impact that both contractors and clients agree on, and it's one as well that the contractors have also classified as their #1 problem. Payment issues, delayed payments. And we have 6, and there's a 76 being done now on unfair payments. And the amount of recommendations that each of these have made in terms of security of payment and statutory adjudication, I don't know why we're still talking procurement when the #1 problem that contractors are having is payment. And you know what? The employers have classified that as their #10 ranked problem. Imagine if of 91 recommendations, we have 42 in the top 10. The employers have that as #10 and they won't pay. Now we know who the major employer is in Trinidad and Tobago in the construction industry. Almost 90% of the work done in construction in Trinidad and Tobago is done by the state. And if the state doesn't pay its contractors on time, I can tell you, right? Several countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Canada, right? China, United States, the United Kingdom, legislation, Malaysia, Singapore, all these countries, governments have actually enacted legislation to make them pay on time. Imagine the government enacts legislation on themselves to make, and you know why, John? The construction industry is the economic barometer of a country. And if you don't pay your contractors in time, and I know the small-minded people who feel we shouldn't pay the contractors in time because we don't have funds, we're going to start the job, it's all political and we don't need to pay everybody. We're going to hold back all the claims and not pay it. And big procurement agencies in this country doing that, for infrastructure and so forth. And I'm going to tell, and they believe that if you drip pay them, right, that we are doing ourselves a favor. I'm telling you, you're not doing a favor. Here's why. Because the construction industry is the economic barometer of a country. When you don't pay your contractors on time, there's a knock-on effect right down the supply chain. All the way down to the manufacturers, and you know what you're doing? You're creating an economic drag. You are actually creating an economic drag in your country. And so you're trying to establish growth, you're trying to establish development, and you're creating an economic drag. And not only that, by starving your construction industry of the monies, you are also starving them of the innovation and entrepreneurship that is required to be competitive in the global market. That's the #2 problem. And legislation is required. We're wasting our time. Listen, we know what they're going to do with procurement. It's time to move on to the next one, the most important one, pay people on time. And if you go to number 34, recommendation, you will see that professor talks about the right to payment. Right? He talked about recommendations for good practice should include recommendations that in place interim payments based on measurement contracts should provide for agreed milestone payments with appropriate conditions governing the right to payment. That's the #2 problem. I ain't reached procurement yet. Right, 1 and 2, definition. The third problem identified by researchers, funny enough, this is where we, coincidence, get knock here. Bills of quantities, right? Contractors have ranked bills of quantities being the number 2 problem. And the employers have ranked it as being the number 9 problem. But Professor Uff's recommendation, which is at 35, says recommended good practice should include recommendations that conditions of contract should place responsibility for bills of quantity where used, and I'm going to tell you, less than 20% of the projects. And we're talking about every single year, several billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is being spent without a bill of quantity on a project. Right? Where bills of quantities are used, the contractor, including the acceptance of any errors of measurements or description by reference to the other contract documents, so that the contract operates as a lump sum, and I suspect he means a firm price lump sum here, contract subject to ordered variations. Now, that recommendation, he made that because he knows that when a contractor is pricing a document, right, even if he finds errors, he divides the quantity by the actual price and he puts the price in the rate. So he's already being compensated for the error. So he's saying here, Professor saying, let them take the responsibility and stop using it as an excuse to get extra monies, you know, right? Surplus profits. So this is what he's saying, you know, and I'm supporting him there too as well. But I have to say that, you know, the majority of bills of quantities prepared on infrastructure works, you know, are not prepared by quantity surveyors. When you see that, those that are prepared, you know, and it's unfortunate. The fourth, that's what 1, 2, 3. The fourth that significant problem identified by Uff, you know, that both contractors and employers have ranked is key performance indices, recommendations for good practice for project success. And that is ranked 14 by contractors. I don't know why contractors don't want to see good project success. And number 4 by the employers. And I'm not surprised. So if we go to number 4, which is recommendation number 28, right? The objectives of the Cabinet Oversight Committee should also include the drawing up and keeping under review recommendations for good practice for the construction industry of Trintoplan. I haven't seen anything since 2010 in that respect. And you can't draw up recommendations for good practice in a little room by yourself. Eh? This has to be an industry-wide thing. Everybody has to have an input into it. I haven't seen it since 2010. And this is in the Uff recommendations. Eh? Right. And the fifth one, and funny enough, the fifth one also has to deal with key performance indices, recommendation for good practice for project success. And that is number 56. Right, number 56 in here is, I have it, right. To the extent the solution for the construction industry embodied in the white paper are not to be implemented, other measures and safeguards should be introduced to secure attainment of the principles of value for money, transparency, and accountability. None of these are my choices, John. This is the choice that the data gathered from employers and contractors who have been investigated through the answering of questionnaires that have gone through statistical analysis of relative importance index and severity index on the impact that they would have on construction, you know, that researchers have done. And these are the top 5. Now I could go on, but like I say, these are the top 5, and I totally agree with them. They are very, very important.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you to all 3 of you. I myself have noticed that since the 1980s, there has been a change in the project, in broad terms, project procurement methods. We have moved away from a traditional design, bid, build model, where there was a lot of thinking done ahead before anybody decided to act. And perhaps that's something which is missing now. It certainly, from my perspective, seems to have driven issues such as inadequate project definition. People aren't looking at what is actually required. The periods for feasibility studies have been reduced. The periods for tendering have been reduced. The construction periods have been reduced. And I agree somewhat with Derek that there is a political motivation to turn the sod, to be seen to be doing different things. As I indicated before, this is a people industry. Politicians are people. We might not want to recognize that from time to time, but politicians are people, contractors are people, those who work for the state-owned enterprises are people, and we each bring to it something of our own selves as well. But if we were to look at it in the primary 2 areas, let's look at it from the contractors and the professional bodies within the industry. And then let's look at it also from the position of the state-owned enterprises, the people who are charged by government with delivering these assets on their behalf. From the industry side, from the contractors' side, from the professional bodies' side, Adesh, how do you think that the industry can react? How can it self-regulate? How can it improve itself?
Well, again, in terms of again, come back to like the Uff recommendations, that the roles of the key personnel from the employer, from the contractor, from the consultant, you need to ensure that they're appropriately qualified, experienced personnel. So that, and again, they need to be proactive in their actions. If they foresee something happening, they need to highlight it, bring it to everyone's attention. And again, we need to be. I think what we lack in Trinidad is collaboration. It's the employers against the consultant and the contractor. The contractors against the consultant and the employer. The consultants against the contractor, and we don't have that collaborative effort among the 3 parties. And then that is something that we have an issue with. The other thing is that, again, in terms of the management, we need to make sure that from all sides, from the employer, the consultant, and the contractor, the appropriate project management techniques have been implemented and being followed. And again, if you pick it up, if the contractor sees some sort of errors that they highlight, it's brought to everyone's attention so it can be dealt with. And I think when I did my master's in England, I had some exposure to the new engineering contract. And one of the comparisons that they made with the FIDIC form, let's use the FIDIC Red Book, is that in the new engineering contract there was a clause for early warning. So if the contractor, if a reasonably experienced contractor foresaw an issue in the design, that he had an obligation to bring it to the attention of the engineer, and not sit down like on the FIDIC Red Book and say, okay, that's the way I can go and claim for. I can submit a claim and make X amount of dollars more on this contract. Again, we need, I think, into this self-regulation is not. I don't think the individual bodies, the Contractors Association, Trinidad and Tobago, the Association of Professional Engineers, or the various professional bodies, and then the various state enterprises. I think there need to be a collaborative effort among all of them, in that we have the same objectives and the same goals, and we're implementing the appropriate practices to achieve that. Again, everybody has to has to ensure that they perform their duties and their duties as defined in their terms of contract with the relevant employer, the consultant and the state enterprise, and the contractor, the state enterprise. Everybody's performing their contractual duties, and in terms of timely delivery of services, timely delivery of designs, proper. We ensuring that. And again, I think you had raised a point there where in terms of reduction in tender time for tender submission, we the drive to turn the sword. We're not giving the contractors enough time to properly analyze the contract, to properly price the stuff, and then you have these short tender periods. The contractor puts in his price, and he realizes only after, well, he didn't factor in for X, Y, and Z or whatever it is because of the short tender period, and then he starts to take a defensive position, and when he's doing submitting claims and being very defensive and probably aggressive towards the consultant and towards the employer. We need to deal with those kind of things. We need to give the again, come back with designs also. You need to give the consultant an appropriate time for undertaking the appropriate feasibility studies. If they have a pre-feasibility study, feasibility studies, detailed conceptual design, detailed design, preparation of tender documents. We need to ensure you have the appropriate time for that. It comes back to in terms of your long-term planning. In terms of, we don't have this with elections every 5 years. We just have a 5-year horizon planning period in the country. We need to put the greater good of the country at hand and do a long-term, a 20-year projection in terms of planning, and we stick to the plan. We work the plan. We stick to the plan. What we also need to look at would be in terms of again, with the self-regulation that we have, we ensure that contracts have proper contracts in place, and in terms of and the proper terms and conditions of contract are fair to all parties. I have had personal citing of where a state enterprise awarded a contract to a contractor, and the bill of quantities came afterwards. After the contract was awarded, and then they developed a bill of quantities to match the accepted contract amount. I personally saw that particular instance there, right? I mean, that was something very worrisome in terms of what's going on. Another one is so many things to talk about. Again, we need to ensure that to protect the employer, that the appropriate securities, performance securities, advance payment securities are in place. So if we have a default on the part of the contractor, on the part of the consultant, that the state, that the taxpayers' money is protected, that there is some recourse, that if you don't have performance by the consultant or the contractor, there is recourse that can be taken that can protect the taxpayers' money. I think that's I kind of summarize what my views on that. I've handed back over to the other panelists for their own opinions.
Adesh's comments, a few very telling issues there, which both sides of the industry should address. Collaboration. Is the industry too hierarchical? Should it be a flatter structure? Should we actually move towards something like the new engineering form of contract, or the alliancing or IPD model, which is in favor at the moment in North America? Good faith. Should there be a need? Should the industry look to bring good faith into contractual practices? Should the professional organizations sit down and agree common goals? And one of them in particular, this limited planning horizon, which at only 5 years could be based around what an incoming government thinks its life expectancy would be. I know we have 5-year election terms in Trinidad, but should the country have a 30-year plan or a 20-year plan? I know in Patrick Manning's era as Prime Minister, he did look forward. He did have a Vision 2020. So Don, over to you. What are your thoughts on those? How can the industry improve?
Well, we have many things to consider here, but the first thing I want to consider is Afra's comment in the chat. I just wanted to read it out. Because as comical, it's not a comical comment, it has a comical nature, but it's a very serious comment. And he said, yeah, we used to call it ratchetry back in primary school days, backfitting the BOQ to suit. Now, that comment probably is very descriptive for many of our colleagues. Oh, no, sorry, let me rephrase that. For some of our colleagues in the industry. When persons hearing us now will think, hey, this construction industry is a mess. No, it's not that at all. I would say that most of our colleagues will complain. So I'm going to take an out of the box approach to this issue right now. Of course, I agree with everything Adesh and Derek say because I've said it many times as well along with them. So they are quite correct in how they paint the industry at its present. The out of the box approach is one. Let's talk about the associations or the civil society association that's supposed to be advocating. We have the JCC, and Afra himself used to be a chair of the JCC at one point. And we have the current JCC president who is trying. He's making statements every so often. And I don't see an acknowledgement by any leader in industry of the statements which he is making. Whatever the issue is, whether it's procurement, roads, drainage, whatever. That's one. Now, the JCC is an umbrella organization. It does represent some other organizations, APITA and so on. But at the end of the day, if we are ignoring the civil society organizations, then we have a real problem in the industry. So that's one. The second thing is, consider that there are only 2 organizations in the entire country that have done a lot of seminars and have done advocacy for this. And one of them being the one that we know, Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and the other one being, which Derek and I am very active in, Derek particularly was one of the founders of it, was the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. Because the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago recognized that other organizations just were not standing up. But when you look at, and I'm not knocking CCGI here, so I'm going to be very careful. When you look at our seminar today, there should have been 500 participants in this seminar, at least. I have been looking at trends in seminars we've hosted, even with the Construction Management Institute, over the last several years. We complain, and when it's time to advocate, we don't advocate. And when some of us are advocating, we stand like the cheese stand alone. And we are thought about as complainers. But what we're advocating for is the right thing. What Derek and Adesh is advocating along themselves for is the right thing for the industry. So let's talk about I'm going to just park that issue on the issue of representation industry. In fact, yes, the industry could come together and they have, but for some reason, which is unbeknownst to me, why is the industry fragmented at this point in time? The Contractors Association, I must say, I have not heard any utterances from them for the last year, possibly, with respect to these issues, and they represent contractors. I'm not knocking the head of the association. I know him very well. That's Glenn. He is an advocate, but for some reason, there's silence. The point is, have we lost our independence in the country to advocate for these issues? So that's one. The second thing I want to bring up here is the issue of whether the entire industry is a mess. No, it's not. What we all bring up today are issues that are very much plaguing our industry. However, you talk to most people want to do the right thing. Most people are doing the right thing. But for people to stand up against those in power who are doing, and I'm not saying, but I mean those in power, to be either politically or not, okay? But to stand up to those persons in power who are not doing the right thing is very challenging because you could lose your job. Young people in our construction industry are quite frustrated with this. Now let's talk about some of the things that Derek talked on. And one of the things they talked about was, if you have an engineer doing a design, and the engineer, and I've spoken to a young engineer who told, she's quite frustrated. She said she did the design to the best of her knowledge, and she was told by a non-technical person, hey, We don't want that. We want something else. We want something less costly. So the problem with that is we have to give the adequate time for design, adequate time for procurement, as both Adesh and Derek were saying. But we're not doing it because of our 5-year political cycle. And until we don't get to a point where we need to come back on and say, what projects are necessary for the country? Do we need another highway, or do we need to fix the existing road network? And I've advocated, fix the road network first, then you could build the highways, if by need they are necessary. We need to come back on and see what projects impact people the most. Derek said, and this is true, that it's the economic barometer of the country. We were also taught in engineering, and by Mr. Nurse, who Adesh knows very well at Trintoplan and so on. Mr. Nurse was my boss as well. And he always said, the economic life of a country is measured by its transportation network, or the efficiency of it. So if we are not putting the resources and the funds in those areas, then the entire thing is not going to work. So that's just going a little bit out of the box, right? But it comes back to another issue now, contract development. So we have something called conditions of contract. I remember many years ago, I would do a condition of contract. It might be about 40, 50 pages. And it tailored to our particular construction climate in this region. I have had complaints from persons who saying that they've been asked to take out clauses of the condition of contract. And if you're going to start wrong, then ultimately you're going to end wrong. Why are we sabotaging our own contracts in place? Everything that Adesh, Derek, and myself talked about, performance bonds, securities, whatever you have, those are well-established systems that, if enforced, could do a whole lot. But I boil it back down to personal ethics. Are we losing our, some of us, not all of us, are some of us losing our personal ethics and unable to let it stand and let it oppose those persons who don't want to see transparency in our country? And I come back to the example that at this point in time, we do not have a regulator. And at this point in time, we have not proclaimed the procurement legislation. And at this point in time, we have taken out a clause out of the procurement legislation which allows some entities to have no oversight. And that is what the industry needs to stand up for. What is right? Thank you.
Thank you, Don. There's some very interesting points there. And Derek, I'd like to pass across to you now. It comes across from Don's comments, from my understanding of it, that there's a potential loss of independence within the industry and a fear of standing up to be counted. Now, I have a separate question which I'll come back to later on that, but in relation to the way that, in relation to Don's comments, this unfair sharing of risk by amending the contract, do you think that the presence of a regulator is going to help that? And how would you recommend that a regulator works within the industry to lobby the government to bring this improvement, which you're all saying is needed?
You know, John, what Don said is not untrue. If we start from the 1960s, government involvement in construction, you know, colonial days from then, it was only about 30%. Private sector did about 70% of the work. As soon as we moved from the 60s, 70s was more or less the same. We got up to the 80s when we had the first setup, the first boom. And government involvement moved in that boom from that 30% to 40 to 60%. And the reason for that was the introduction of what we call G2G, government to government arrangement, contractual arrangements. And it hasn't gone back down. We moved from the 1980s, and by 2000, government was doing 75% of the work in the construction sector. That was the introduction of design bill and design bill forms of procurement. And then from the 2000s to now, government is doing about 89, 90% of the amount of money spent in the construction industry, you know, and that is significant through these PPPs, you know. It's a form of design bill with finance and all kind of stuff in it now, you know, right? We have moved from 30% to government taking a massive control of the construction industry, and they're doing this through just about 4 large, and I call it monopoly, you know, special purpose company. And you know how good monopoly is for any industry. It's fantastic. It allows them to take advantage of everybody. That no engineer, architect, quantity surveyor, contractor, subcontractor, supplier, manufacturer dare speak ill about them for fear they will get no work. This is an unhealthy position for our construction industry. It also stifles, again, innovation and entrepreneurship. How are you going to develop innovation and entrepreneurship if you're taking control, you know, 89, 90% of an industry? An industry that is the most important industry outside of the energy sector, non-energy. You know, it's the industry where every job on site has a multiplier effect of creating 4 to 6 more jobs downstream. So because of that control, you've basically controlled the employment sector, because it's the largest employer outside. So there's nobody and no organization dare at this moment speak ill, you know, of their methods of operation. I already said, yeah, it's what it is, you know. Now, there was a recent case, 2017. There was a judge who was bold enough to say something in that case, Justice James Abood. And this goes back to what Don was alluding to. He talked about something called unlawful means conspiracy. He said that it was a new thought in England and the Commonwealth, and it has been developing incrementally since 2008. He said it has been unanimously endorsed by the House of Lords or the Supreme Court of England. And he says, he gave us 7 examples of where the thought of conspiracy can be found. Number 1, he said, special purpose company engages in the awarding and management of construction contract that is not part of its mandate. We have seen that. He says the respective engineers appointed by the employer under each of its construction contracts is in breach of his employment duties and or his duties as engineer under the respective contracts. Certified payments for work without verifying whether those works have been carried out. He says it's simply rubber stamping valuations. Listen, I know of many professionals who just sit down in their office and do valuations, you know. They don't even go out on the site. They don't even do inspections anymore. They don't do any testing anymore. They let the contractor test himself. I have had to do a project audit on some construction projects. And there was a contractor who submitted 1,028 tests, all 100% pass. That defies statistical logic. You cannot have 100% test. Not calibrating the equipment before doing all the tests and submitting it, and the engineer accepting it. Which engineer accepts 100% of 1,028 tests? All passed to good, 100%. You know, even in the best statistical thing, in which we talk about standards inside of a factory where you have a controlled environment, you know, you can get what, 92% to 96%, you know, in terms of accuracy. So this is the sort of things that we need to understand, that we as professionals have an obligation. But the question is, no professional wants to stand up and then be ostracized. I have had several of our students from the university who have gone out there and work, and we've taught them ethics and morality. We teach them ethics and morality. It's a subject. No, because our qualifying body, right? You know, which is the body that gives you accreditation for your course, requires it to be taught. And by common sense, it should be. But they go out there and they meet people who tell them, their seniors who say, nah, don't worry with that. You know, we've been doing this like this all the time. You can't come here and change this thing. You know, and then pressuring them to sign because the senior don't want to sign, you know, he wants to pressure the junior to sign. You know, and so we have to understand that this monopolistic behavior at the state in an industry as important like this, you know, it just cannot continue. We have to reverse some trends. And people will not speak out. You know, bodies will not speak out, you know, in respect of these things, or else you get victimized. James
Some very important.
Justice
Sorry,
James also said that practical completion and or completion of contracts and or interim payment certificates issued to contractors purporting to verify the works were undertaken and are satisfactorily completed. You know, where quantities constructed were less than those stated in the bills of quantities, or works have been omitted and were defective and or useless and or not needed and paid for. He says, these are examples. This is examples. And there are others, you know, but in his final statement, he said, unlawful can include the tort of bribery, the tort of unknowing receipt, and dishonest assistance. In a nutshell, he's guiding us. And this is a construction case, you know, and he's guiding us to say, I know what is happening out there. So I have found it pertinent to bring to bear a new thought that is outside of the country, that is recognized by our highest court. You know, and therefore he's saying that we need to look at this if we have to address or rectify or reverse the trends of what is happening in our industry. And it's critical. So we had off 2010. We have judgments that have taken place in our courts. We have not yet made a dent in ensuring that the 91 recommendations, 42 of which are in the 10 top ranked most significantly to impact the performance of our industry, have not been adequately addressed 13 years later. And that's where I'd like to leave it, John.
There's some very probing points there. The reliance on the public purse. That's also, I somebody with a limited knowledge of the history of Trinidad and Tobago, gained over the 10, 12 years I was living there, that seems to have been also concurrent with the growth and then demise of the oil industry and the demise of the sugar industry. Is it a case that construction has taken taken a significant part of the economy which those two industries previously occupied? The potential monopoly being unhealthy through four principal state-owned enterprises. But also you've mentioned things which I see, and Adesh had actually posted in the comments about the issue of quality assurance, that it's been removed from the consultant's scope of work and been reliant upon contractors. Now, I see things like that every day in other jurisdictions as well. And I see many similar problems to the ones which we've discussed so far today in other jurisdictions. And the performance of state-owned enterprises, the performance of contracting organizations. Given that this is possibly a function of the world moving forwards and people bringing into Trinidad the philosophies from other jurisdictions, to put more responsibility on the contractor, for example, to regulate itself, to be a single point of delivery, and to reduce the reliance on government entities. Many of these models have worked elsewhere. The state-owned enterprise has worked extremely well in Europe for delivery of public assets. So, Don, why would you think that it's not being quite so successful in Trinidad?
All right. So let me see if I ask you, let me clarify this question. The question is, why isn't the model of self-regulation by contractors successful? Is that the question?
Why isn't that model successful? Why isn't the model of procurement through state-owned enterprises quite as successful as it is in other countries as well? Where do you perceive the failings to be?
So I wouldn't say necessarily that we have failed totally. I think there are success stories. I mean, I want to be fair because I am mindful of the participants in the room, some from UDCOT and Ministry of Agriculture and so on. There are success stories where the model works. But often in Trinidad media, we would hear about those that didn't work. So to me, it's obviously not entertaining or exciting to report on models that worked. I think with Adesh experience at Trintoplan and Derek's experience at QESL and so on, and all the other persons we have in the room, there are models that work. I think the challenge here is looking at those projects which are scrutinized. So let us look at what has been reported in the media and why we think it doesn't work. Those projects which are mostly scrutinized are those which are what you call, for want of a better word, a mega project. Okay, the highways, roads, things that affect people majorly on a daily basis. There may be other situations on other projects where they are mega in nature, but for some reason the focus is not there. Why the model has not worked totally is because we haven't customized, that's one, entirely, and we haven't also enforced our customization. So let me explain. It comes back to the point I was making before about the conditions of contract. There are times you open a contract, in my experience, past experience, and the conditions of contract really apply to Canada, to United States, to England. Because we just copy it. We didn't use conditions of contract applicable to Trinidad. But then, have we done enough research? But Derek is talking about the research done with his students. Have we taken that research and driven it into the industry? There seems to be a little bit of disconnect right now between research and industry. because researchers are doing good work at both universities. They're doing excellent work. But has the research been accepted by the industry, or is it packed up in a library? And that is what we need to get to. So that is one area, in my opinion, considered opinion, why the model may not have worked. I have said this over and over again, the issue of ethics. Now let's talk about the roads. That's something I advocate for all the time. You'll see more in the media talking about roads pell-mell everywhere. Why it is we gave a contract to a road, let's say about a few weeks ago, and thereafter the road has no, let's use the Trintoplan breakup. Okay? There are many things wrong there, and I'm talking about the famous road, the one in Manzanilla, right? So I'm not going to call any names, obviously, but we know the road. And now, I mean, Adesh and I was talking about this, and Adesh is a very excellent geotechnical engineer, so I give all credit to him on this one. And we talked about gradation and so on. But then, if gradation is the issue, couldn't we have solved that? Yes. There are systems in place to do all of these tests. Derek was talking about tests as well. There are systems in place to ensure quality assurance. There are systems in place to ensure effective contract management. There is a lot of data, research all over the internet. It's hundreds of years of data on how we do construction projects. So the question as to why the model isn't working is because some of us, and I say this very openly, we are sabotaging our own model. We are simply, some of us are simply ignoring the tenets of the contract, right? I said this in the previous comment, but I'll just repeat it here, is that we have young people who are quite frustrated, right? They are frustrated because they go into the universities, they learn how to do it the right way, and when they come out, they're being told, hey, don't do it this way, do it the wrong way. How are we going to overcome this generational issue? So I think the model is there, the information is there, the data is there, the methods are there. We have a lot of specifications, codes, standards, what have you. But I've always said that any policy you develop, people are intelligent to develop a policy, and there are some people intelligent to find a loophole in the said policy. And this is where we are not only here in Trinidad, but it's a symptom of the world as well. So to overcome this is what I suggest as a solution, because I'm only talking problems, right? You know, my boss always say, you're only talking problems, but you're not talking solutions. So let's talk solutions. One, the industry has to come together. We are not. There are persons in I'm going to share something openly here in this group. When I first started advocating, I was told by someone in the industry that you are a clown, not you, John. I, Don, I'm a clown. That was the statement that was told to me. Don, you are a clown. Why are you doing this? And I said, okay, if you think I'm a clown, fine. I'll put some makeup, whatever. But this is the kind of thing, and this is from a leader, and I'm going to call his name, but this is from a leader in the industry, in one of the associations. And I said to myself, my gosh, why have we arrived? We need to come together, advocate. Now, some people say, but Don, you're only doing this because you're anti, and I'm going to say it openly, you're anti-PNM. No, sir. I am neither PNM nor UNC. I'm neither red nor yellow, as they say in Trintoplan. I am pro-national. Okay? So, whether it's this government, the last government, the next government before, we need to hold the government accountable for the taxpayers' money. That is what we need to do. We need to ask them for transparency, for accountability, for everything. So when money is spent, we know we get value for money. And with respect to roads as an example, we can't be fixing a road today and 6 months thereafter it's breaking up. And we all know the ways to fix it. We know about tests, about quality tests, so we know. The industry very much knows what it has to do. The question is, why are the leaders in the industry saying to the government of the day, here's what, we can't be operating like this? And maybe some are, but again, it's falling on their face. Just to highlight a comment in the chat there from Afro, which is, I'm to quote him now, which is when himself told himself, it's even one an old kaiso by spoiler, I want to feel. That's true. All right, quite true. So I could go on and on, but I'll leave it on that point for now.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time and that we're going to open up the floor to questions in about 15 or 20 minutes. So I'd like to give you each 2 minutes to tell me one thing which you are going to be advocate for and push through in the next 2 years. Of all the things we've discussed today, I want you to pick one. Adesh, where would you go with this?
I would. That's a very difficult question. 2 minutes. All right. I think what we need to ensure is that we need to ensure that there's accountability on the employer and the employer fulfilling their duties, the contractors fulfilling their duties, and the consultants fulfilling their duties, as well as the enforcement of, I don't like to use the term penalties, but penalties that if they don't fulfill their duties, then we have some level of accountability for our action. And then probably people will take their roles and their responsibilities a bit more seriously. And in terms of the delivery of projects to the citizens of the country. That's basically what I would be pushing for, the accountability from all parties. That's what I would like to see.
That's fine, thank you, Derek. I think Adesh may have stolen your principal talking point there. So, what else would you like to see? You have one topic that you're going to be able to push forward on in the next 2 years.
No, Johnny, he is quite correct. You know, of the 91 recommendations made by Professor Uff, 28% of them talks about and addresses the issue of accountability. Accountability, you know, as an action item, when you classify it, you know, coming out in terms of the recommendation, it's the number one, you know, thing that I would like to see done. We talk about transparency, but transparency without accountability is just not good enough. We talk about enforcement of the contract conditions. We talk about the enforcement of making good defects. You know, we talk about the enforcement of delayed damages. You know, we talk about the enforcement in terms of flagging, you know, poor performing contractors and consultants. You know, we talk about the enforcement of the bills of quantities, you know, as a cost management tool, you know, as something that the contractor should take responsibility for and not hide behind. You know, we talk about enforcement in terms of testing that has now been transferred to contract. How can you test yourself? And the engineering profession has given up that responsibility to the contractors. That was something that when I came into the industry, engineers used to do. You know, they used to determine the test and send it to an independent testing agency, and they used to tell the contractor that he had to either break it out, you know, or fix it. Can you imagine the contractor testing himself on a structure that doesn't meet the structural requirements of the codes? What would happen in an earthquake? Or one of these perils that we have? We have to be, you know, we have to understand, and people feel it's only doctors and so forth that deal with lives. Engineers hold the lives of all of us in their hands. So in every single structure that we are in, at home, in the office, driving on the road, bridges, drains, you know, airports, our lives are at stake. They should be given more responsibility. They should be nurtured and should be given the same protection as doctors in terms of, you know, but because our lives are in their hands. So accountability, and I have to agree with Adesh, he's a professional engineer, he's, you know, and it's not stealing the thunder. It's because that is what is required now.
Thank you. Don, you're a big advocate of procurement, so procurement legislation. So I'm not going to let you use that one as your target for the next 2 years. So
no, I wasn't going to use it.
Excellent. I hope you're not going to use accountability either.
No, of course not. No, at all. I have this. What I'm suggesting is I'm actually stealing it from someone. So let me explain what I mean. I'm stealing it out of the UK. You know, one of my good colleagues, I speak to him from time to time, is Sir John Amit of the He's the chair of the National Infrastructure Commission in the UK. Okay? And they did a report on flooding. So it's such an excellent report, how they analyze flooding in the UK. I mean, and it's free, right? You can go to the National Infrastructure Commission website and get that report. And of course, we know what flooding has done in our country. So therefore, the idea I'm stealing here is that we probably need, this is my call, we need to advocate for independent National Infrastructure Commission in our country. And I say independent because the Office of the Procurement Regulator is supposed to be independent, that takes our projects, ranks them through some set criteria, and says, these are the projects we are going to take on for the next 5, 10, 15, 20-year periods. And the criteria has to be based on criteria not just about political expediency, because many of these problems that both Adesh and Derek talking about is driven by votes. And therefore you have compromises in quality, ethics, and the like. So we need to have a National Infrastructure Commission that says, these are the projects we're going to do, and what are the criteria that we're going to use to evaluate them on? Is it to the public good? Is it going to enhance economic development? Is it going to enhance our PR image of the country? Because that right now is definitely, I think, a challenge for us. Is it going to enhance our development as a nation? We have schools, we haven't touched on that today. We have schools that are have failing infrastructure. How do we expect to educate our children in schools with some failing infrastructure? So we need to have a National Infrastructure Commission that ranks the projects, publicly funded projects. And of course, the government should be listening to the National Infrastructure Commission. They prepare reports, and not just party reports. Listen to what they say. It's comprised of industry professionals. It could be very much sourced from the JCC, from APET, from the Institute of Surveyors, from the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago, but it must be a wholly collaborative effort by professionals across a wide scope, including finance persons, including developers, including economists, that sits down and says, these are the projects that we must undertake, and there must be a return on investment. And return on investment will not always mean, profit. A return on investment could be public interest, but we need to put a cost to that. How do we enhance the economy for our nation over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? So that's my call, National Infrastructure Commission.
Thank you. An issue which we spoke about before was difficulties of payment, and a lot of those issues of payment, from my experience in Trinidad, arose out of diverse interpretations of the requirements of the contract, which again goes, I think, to inadequate project definition, and even potentially the lack of a structured payment mechanism as well. Now, the contracts which are adopted in Trinidad all have provisions for dispute resolution without going to court and without going to arbitration. But quite often they're set aside as well. Is it that those alternative methods, for example, under FIDIC, you have the Dispute Adjudication Board, but there are others. You can have early neutral evaluation. You can have early expert opinion. You could have mediation. Is it that those are not trusted by the industry, be either side of the industry, be it the owner side, the employer side, or the contractor side? Or is it that they rely upon arbitration and litigation, which are very, very expensive processes and usually extremely protracted? Is it that the industry as a whole is relying upon those for impartiality? And I'd love to hear the views of the three of you on what is the best way forward for the industry to get out of this trap of disputes, this trap of litigation and arbitration, and only resolving things 5 or 10 years after the event. Derek, over to you again, please.
John, when I came into quantity surveying 40-something years ago, quantity surveyors would mediate basically 99% of the problems between the contractor and the employer. And that was done pretty efficiently until commissions of inquiries and several lawyers have taken over the construction industry in terms of drafting and everything. And we don't use that mechanisms to resolve disputes anymore. The professionals. Now it's let's go to court. Let's go to arbitration. And I can tell you, the basis of our Arbitration Act, it's an old archaic 1938 Act that needs revamping, because right now, as an attorney at law, if a client comes to me and he has a dispute, and he says that he wants to use any of these dispute resolution mechanisms, I would tell him no. And I'm telling him no to save him money and time. I'd say let's go straight to litigation, because the courts have even held in Trinidad and Tobago, even where there's an arbitration clause or a mediation clause, right, that the parties have agreed to be bounded by this mechanism to resolve this. The courts have let them out of that and said, no, you can't oust the courts. You cannot oust the courts. We have full control. Final arbiter. And so you spend a lot of years going through arbitration, and now the process is as expensive as court, full of people like me, right? You have all the professionals wearing all the different professionals, all the different experts and all, and then you get an award, as we've seen recently, right, on the Solomon Uchoi Highway, and the court say, no, we don't recognize the arbitrator's award. Right? Let's go back and do it over. No, you see, unless we have modern arbitration laws that narrows down the position, as in the UK, that you only have 2 grounds now, for arbitration. The arbitrator exceeded his jurisdiction, or he was patently biased, not apparent. He has to be patently biased, right? Those are the only 2 in which you could challenge the arbitrator's award. Our Arbitration Act is like a strainer. You could challenge it at any time, and you don't even have to wait till the project finishes. You could stop the project in the middle and go to arbitration, and and all of that. We're archaic. We cannot have proper dispute resolution mechanisms, until we have a buy-in from the courts that they will, and if certain legislation is not there, the judges really have a right to do what they have to do. And they're basically saying to you, the state, listen, you guys go and fix things, because if you don't fix it, this is what's going to happen. So my view, very cynical view in terms of dispute resolution in the construction industry. But when we used to do it in the early days, as the professional engineers and the professional architects and the professional engineers, we would resolve 99% of those. But now everybody walks with, a litigation hat. So,
yeah, I have to agree with you that the only people making, the people who seemingly make the most money out of construction projects are the external consultants, the dispute resolvers, the arbitrators, the lawyers.
And the expert witness.
I'm sorry, say again?
And the expert witness.
And the expert witness. Thank you for that. I'll take that as a dig. Thank you. And in fact, I'd like to see some comments from the audience as to, are they involved in dispute resolution, and how would they like to see disputes resolved? Are they happy with the process the way it is in the contractual framework, or do they find it's frustrating? Not only frustrating them as individuals, but frustrating the organizations they work for and frustrating the industry as well. Adesh, same question to you. what would you like to see happening to speed up dispute resolution? You mentioned the NEC before, and that puts a lot of burden on good faith.
Well, again, good faith is a term that we have used in Trinidad, but I don't think we keep it. I mean, as I said, my personal experience is that as a consultant, that one of our contracts with the employer indicated that the contract will be executed in good faith. Right? That use that exact term. A contract will be executed in good faith. And okay, so you pay me late. What provisions are there for me? What recompense is there for me when you pay me late? Could you we put this to the employer? Could you the same in the same vein under the FIDIC Red Book, the contractor is allowed to claim for interest charges for late payment? Would the employer extend that same good faith to the consultant, and the employer say, sorry, hard luck there. You get paid late, you get paid late. You can't claim for any interest charges. So I mean, good faith. I mean, I think we need to be very serious about the words that we put into our contracts here, and ensure we understand what the words mean and we keep it. But I just need to share I agree with Mr. Outridge about the Arbitration Act. I mean, this thing was formulated in 1939, and the last amendment to it, I think, from what I'm seeing, is that it's around 1997 was the last amendment to that act. So you're looking at probably about 26 years past since that act was last amended, and the amount of changes that have taken place in dispute resolution and what could be incorporated into this act. You had mentioned certain in your preface to your question about mediation and early expert testimony. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that those are things that we're not really, probably generally, we're not familiar with in Trinidad. So things like I think the enlightened state, well, the owners of the project as well as the consultants, contractors, what other measures are available for dispute resolution, which would be less, which would be again less costly to everyone. Quicker resolution. We need to probably have some sort of workshops to give to disseminate this information on these alternative measures to the people involved in these projects, so that we can incorporate that into our conditions of contract in terms of dispute resolution. And again, as Mr. Outridge pointed out, the court seems to even though the conditions of the contract may say X, Y, and Z, the court says no, we'll throw that out. We are the final arbiter, right? I mean, again, we need to ensure that there's some sort of harmonious relationship between what the conditions of contract says, what the Arbitration Act says, what in terms of what and then again the courts of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of how far their powers will extend in these sorts of circumstances. That's something that we need to deal with. I think that's roughly about what I mean my views on it. But I think what we really need to do locally is have some sort of workshop put on by the various professional bodies in terms of what dispute resolution, alternative dispute resolution measures there are. Obviously, they'll have pros and cons, and then again is that collaboration in terms of how do we incorporate that aspect into our conditions of contract. If something comes up, there's a measure that can be quickly and inexpensive in order to resolve these matters. I mean, right now I'm still dealing with a claim from a contractor probably about 4 or 5 years now. We're trying to sort this thing out. I mean, the employer has been slow to respond to our recommendation. Contractor is frustrated. We are frustrated, and then we get a call from employer, you need to close this up tomorrow. So I mean, so we're trying to see how best we can negotiate this thing. I mean, I've had meet with the contractor, we sit down and we try to see each other's point of view to try and get this thing done as painlessly as possible. So the alternative dispute resolution measures that are practiced in other territories, again, we need exposure. We need some information on that, and could it be applied locally to our situation?
Thank you. We are now in the period where we have a Q&A. So if anybody does want to ask questions, please raise your hand. Dion Codrington has actually raised a question in the chat room and said he's unable to speak at the moment. So I will read the question. Based on the experience of the panel, is the type of contracts agreed upon for projects a direct result of delayed projects as depending on the type of contract boxed vendors stroke contractors in? And the second part of the question, is there any experience where a dispute resolution would have aid a contract change? Not likely, but just asking. For example, a project may have started with a cost plus contract, but perhaps in time and material contract may have been better. Don, do you want to address that? The first part is the type of contract boxing in vendors and contractors.
Well, yes. Well, I also want to dovetail a little bit over Derek and Adesh, and then get into this question. You know, this whole issue of dispute, of course, I agree with what they say. Derek and Adesh is talking about once the dispute has occurred and how we treated it. My philosophy on disputes is, why do we have them in the first place? So why can't we avoid them in the first place? For example, a typical dispute I remember having in the early stage of development was weather. So a contractor would make a claim for weather and claim the entire rainy season. And I said to the contractor, did you not know that rain was going to fall in the rainy season? Okay. And as comical as it is, how could we have solved that? Depending on the project, we should not have started that project in the rainy season. We could use the rainy season to plan projects and use the dry season to execute. So that's just a park on the side. So I'm gonna answer the question from Dion in a little bit, but let me just get to the other things I wanted to say. So we need to also have data and research on what is the prevalent cause of dispute. I think Derek does have some research. And once we know the source of dispute, the biggest source of dispute you would believe in contracts is not being able to understand the contract. And this comes back right back to Uff's recommendation number 2. And I'm just going to repeat for sake of argument. Management should be performed by experienced persons who should take, I just ad lib in here, positive and proactive decisions. So if you don't have the right people on the client side and the contractor side and the consultant side managing the project, you would find often that there is a misunderstanding or misalignment of the contract and how it is interpreted. So interpretation, so the language of the contract has to be clear, but interpretation is another issue that we have in terms of what causes disputes. Cash flow causes disputes, right? We have the subcontractor submits a cash flow. We accept the cash flow as a client, and when it's time to pay, and this is what Derek was talking about, prompt payment legislation, sorry. We're not paying the contractor, and then we expect the contractor to continue doing the work out of pocket for months and still not paying them, even though the engineer may have recommended it. So these are typical disputes, right? And like I said, in my experience, I've seen the cash flow as a major dispute. I've seen misinterpretation of the contract as a major dispute, because how I interpret the contract may be different from how another person interprets the contract, but the contract language is clear. So perhaps what we need to do is go back to contract reviews. If we design a contract and we tailor it, then we probably need to have someone review it. Just like design reviews. When I was at Trintoplan with Adesh would know this. We used to do design reviews of others. It's a professional, mature action. And they used to do also design reviews of our designs. And it brought up errors that we corrected and so on. So perhaps we need to do contract reviews as well. The final thing I have to say before I answer the question, or get to the question, sorry, is I know the Attorney General spoke about in January about the challenges of the courts in terms of resourcing and so on as a challenge to the implementation of the Act. So of course I'm no lawyer, so I'm not going to speak on that. But what I'm going to say is that there was some discussion on having a special arm of the court to deal with our construction disputes, because as Derek would know himself, when it gets to the court, it takes months, sometimes years, and Adesh talked about it. It takes months, sometimes years, and in the meantime, the contract goes nowhere. And during that time, when all this is being delayed in the courts, because of no fault of the courts, they have a lot of cases. prices are changing, escalating, changing, conditions are changing, and so the project gets invariably delayed or shelved. Now, that's into the question. So the understanding based on the experience is the type of contract upon projects a direct result of delayed projects as depending on the type of contract box vendors, contractors. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that question because I'm not sure if I'm interpreting that question correct. So I will leave that for anyone else who wants to answer. But the part B, which is any experience when a dispute resolution would have aid to a contract change. Well, I think we should have some lessons learned. If we've had disputes in contracts and we have the correct research, and I'm hoping that I interpret the question correctly, then it should inform the next contract that you do because invariably you learn from your past errors. But I am not sure if we have that sort of repository in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is why research is important. To have the students doing research and then tying in the research to the industry for change. Otherwise, if our research is not being tied into the industry, then our universities are becoming non-functional. And I hope that's not the case, right? So I'll answer that there, but the part A, I think I could probably leave it to either Adesh or to answer that one.
Derek, can I turn to you? And I would like to ask you as well. I have experience, for example, of working on a pre-dispute board, such as the type that they had in the 2012 Olympics in the UK, whereby before anything goes for dispute, whether it's the validity of a change order or something more formal, it has to go through this project-based dispute review board, even before it goes to adjudication. Do you see merit in something like that? Is it something that you would welcome within the contracts in Trinidad? And do you think that the appropriate forms of contract are being used? We mentioned before that there's a lot of amendments to it. Is it the amendments which are actually hog-tying the industry rather than the contracts themselves?
That's a lot there, John. And if I could start with your last point, because Don touched on it, that there are contract conditions that are being written that are now transferring 100% of the risks of the employer onto the contractor. And that's not good for any industry because the employer here, being the largest significant employer in the construction industry, is the one who best can carry those risks. You don't pass the risks of the 100% of the employers onto the contractor. Most standard forms of contract, as it is, try to balance the risk 50-50. So it's all right to move some of those risks, maybe at 10%, but not all 50%. And it is being done by the largest of state corporations at handling, right, the largest of that 90% of the construction works, and they are doing this, passing 100% of the risk. No small, medium contracting company can carry those risks. None. And it's destroying the small and medium enterprise, which is the machine and the growth of our industry. When last you've heard a small, medium company has become a medium-sized company and then grow to a large company? What are the large construction companies in Trinidad and Tobago? Basically two, other than the foreigners. So isn't that we're creating conditions of contract for the benefit of a select few? And so when he talks about contract boxing the vendors and contractors, this is what we're talking about, conditions of contract that are unfair to the contractor. But you ask any lawyer and they say, once you sign to that, hands are tied, so you made your bed, so you shall lie. The thing is that it's duress. This is how I see it. It is duress. If government controls 90% of the construction industry and a fella can't put in, but he need to get some food, he need to feed, he has to sign. How is he gonna get work? This is duress. And then they pull out the big lawyers and they go quickly for senior counsel and whatnot and hit this poor little man on the head with a massive sledgehammer. This is completely unfair and it's happening, you know, in the industry. Now, I understand his part B, and any sensible person doing a construction job, and John, you would know this, in a developed country, before you decide what the form of procurement, contract procurement would be, I'm talking about the form of contract, you do what is called a construction procurement report that tells you the best route depending on if you want quality, if you want cost certainty, or you want schedule certainty. The contracts decide where the risks lie. The contract document is the risk management plan. And you need to do a construction procurement report, horses for courses, but when you have a budget made, national budget made, and it is said by the executive, we are going to use the PPP form of procurement. You've actually slotted all the projects into a single form of procurement, whether it's suitable or not. But you know, so because you need finance, you do this. The thing is that you haven't, there's an industry. We are professionals. You need to talk to us. You need to understand, because I don't know if the people who sit on these boards, you know, of these special purpose companies, and there are 38 of them, man. I could count the number of engineers on these boards on one hand. I would need 10 hands to count the amount of attorneys on these boards.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in construction. Why are the boards a proliferation of it? If they're supposed to be there to do construction work, they should be engineers, architects, you know, surveyors, you know. If attorneys, by all means, attorneys who understand construction contract, and only a few of them, right? It's a specialist issue. In England, they have a whole court, the technology and construction court, because they understand that, you know, and the judges and so forth, they could come from the industry, you know. The thing about it, and the Chief Justice mentioned it, Don touched on it, he's mentioned that, hey, if I have to implement this procurement law, I need a special commercial court alone, because it's going to clog up the rest of my court system with the amount of challenges. And I'm saying, by all means, make it a construction and commercial court. Let's put the two things, the procurement and construction, in one court. We have court cases here that have started in 2015 that have no end, you know, that have, you know, because it's construction, not murder, it ain't gonna happen tomorrow. It has to, it's in the queue, right? And then it's the wherewithal as to whether anybody wants to resolve the matter or not. It's good to keep it going. It's good politics, you know. The question is, you know, these things are not fitting our industry. You know, Uff said it. We've said it. Uff said 3 things he said in 3 of his recommendations, you know. 2 of the recommendations, recommendation number 75, right? In recommendation number 75, he talks about all state agency boards must be held responsible and accountable. All state agency boards must be held responsible and accountable for the planning and implementation of their projects. You know, right? I don't know that any of these special purpose company boards, the 38 of them, that they are carrying liability for the construction projects, you know. And he also said it in recommendation number 91, right? the HDC board must be held accountable for any deviations from the rules, regulations, procedures, and guidelines, and must be held responsible for ensuring that their projects are implemented within agreed time, cost, and quality standards. This was said, these two things are said since 2010, 13 years ago. And in number 54, you know, recommendation number 54, he said there should be no doubt, as there presently is, as to the power of ministers to give instructions to government agency companies on any matter within the minister's remit, including compliance with rules, regulation, and procedure. If this cannot be achieved by voluntary means, consideration should be given to creating an agency as a statutory corporation incorporating such powers. So I don't know if we're spinning top in mud, but John, it means that since 2010 to now, and I know that the Prime Minister did set up some committee to look into the implementation of these 91 recommendations of Professor Uff, and the discussion that came out is they're all implemented. We don't have to talk about it anymore. And here we are today, 91 recommend. And let me tell you something. Nobody's come to us in the industry. They just sit down and in a little room by themselves and say, hey, take this one off, take that one off, take that. Yeah, boy, we finish all. You know, and it's done. But it certainly doesn't appear to me out here in the industry, and nobody's come to me and come to the university, you know, and ask any one of us, you all have research on this, you all have data on that, you all know nothing like that, nothing like that. And so I can see why the gentleman asked the part A and part B question, you know, because
Thank
it's
you, Derek.
Yeah.
I'd like to pass this across to Adesh now, just for a couple of minutes before we close. There are no other questions from the chat room. I do have one other, but I'd like to pose to Adesh. Adesh, you're in a better position than probably Don or Derek to look at the way contracts are being drafted to go out to tender. Do you think that by the changes that are being made, there is a preferred selection of contractors? Do you think that the drafting of the contract is narrowing the industry at all? Forcing procurement to a limited number of proven tested suppliers, rather than those who should be perhaps afforded an opportunity?
Well, from my personal experience right now, I don't think that is occurring, and that I think all contractors are being given a fair opportunity to tender on the project. With respect to the evaluation of the tenders, that is something that may be questionable in terms of how the state enterprises are selecting selecting the preferred tender in terms of the criteria. Are they giving too much a greater weighting to financial than the technical part of the proposal that these contractors are submitting? And that again, in a sense, certain contractors could cut their profit margin and still function. So in terms of their rates, would give them a greater weighting in the overall tender evaluation. So it is possible that, I think it's more the tender evaluation part of it rather than the conditions of contract giving preference to the contractors. Everyone has the opportunity to tender on it. Everyone has the opportunity to each contractor has the opportunity to build up his or her, their team with the appropriate skill set to give them a good technical score. But I think what's happening is that the financial aspect of the tenders being given a greater weighting rather than the technical part of the proposal. With consultants locally, you tend to get probably the technical proposal from the consultant being given like 60 or 70% weighting and the financial 30%. Whereas with the construction, you get the technical probably being 30%, 40%, and the financial being 60%. Probably, I think that is where we may need to look back at in terms of the procurement, what weighting is given for technical versus financial. To me, you need to ensure that your contractor understands the project, has the appropriate people on board for executing project, for managing it and executing it. And I think we may need to look back at how we weight the tender evaluation for the construction contract. What I also would like to see, I mean, again, this is a personal experience, is that in the tender evaluation, that the employer has the consultant as part of the tender evaluation team. Again, if we don't have recommendation number 2 in the Uff report being followed, where management roles should be performed only by experienced persons who should be motivated to take positive and proactive decisions, you can get the tender evaluations not being done properly, and we are awarding contracts to the wrong contractor, which would result in issues down the road when you have to execute the contract, in terms of quality, claims, those sorts of things. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, thank you. There is another point just come in the chat room from Gayasi Ambrose, and we only have a couple of minutes now, and then I will have to pass back to Kamla. He says, unable to speak at the moment. However, my main question is, should we also consider program project management legislation such as the PMIAA in the US or GPDF in the UK, which would guide how we select programs, projects, and those who are qualified to manage? Having been lectured by Mr. Outridge at UE in the MSc Project Management Program, reading and listening to Mr. Raymond and keeping abreast of the relevant documentation such as the Uff Report, I'm of the belief that while procurement legislation is important, one area we are missing is that many of these projects should not even be undertaken or are poorly managed. Such a payment cash, so we may need to look at those aspects to even avoid reaching the stage where dispute resolution is needed. I think I agree quite a lot with that. The Uff report was insightful, and I think it brought together all of the issues which Gayasi Ambrose speaks of there. But in 30 seconds, do any of you have any other comments on that? Do you think we do need a PMIAA or a GPDF?
I see Afro Ribbon's hand is up, so
yes, I've just seen that.
Yeah, but I would like to see John. The fact that the 91 recommendations have not yet been addressed, that some new initiative be taken to set up some organization, committee, or body to actually seriously address these, as what happened with Latham and Egan when nothing happened with the report for 12 years, that the new report, Rethinking Construction, had to be done in order to address what was a previous commission of inquiry in which nothing was done. And I think we're there now, 13 years later, we're in the same place as the UK.
Thank you. Afra, would you like to come in?
Sure. Three points to make. This has been an excellent seminar, and I want to thank colleagues for taking the time and putting out that kind of effort, okay? I've listened carefully, and there's 3 points I wanted to make here. I just proceed in what seems to me to be the correct order. The first point is the whole point about the state having the advantage in terms of size. Derek has outlined, they say that size really does matter. Derek has outlined, going back to the 70s, how the proportion of work conducted by the state has risen till now it's virtually 90% within our society, okay? which is a figure I broadly agree with. And how we can make sense of that is to go back to the learning in the Bala report from March of '82. Because Lennox Bala, who was then the PS in charge of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, was asked by Prime Minister Chambers to do an examination of the government-to-government arrangements, which were convulsing the country. And that request for the examination came out of Winston Riley's paper of October of '78. So Winston's paper convulsed the industry, and Williams didn't do anything about it. But Chambers, when he came in, asked Bala to look at it. And one of the interesting findings in Bala is not been much spoken about because people are looking for controversy and bubble. One of the interesting findings in Bala is Bala makes a very piercing point that given the fact that we were acquiring so many contracts at once for goods, works, and services, we as a country, the public interest in the country, we had a tremendous negotiating strength. We had a negotiating position of tremendous strength, and we never put it to work. Each contract was treated silo, 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 piece, 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 piece. And in every single contract, we had been advantaged. But the actual collective benefits of approaching it as a big portfolio of work, the country never did that. So that's actually a very piercing insight from Lennox Bala from March of '82. And it actually dovetails awkwardly. You see, it's not just the insight. What could we learn from it? It dovetails awkwardly with the point you all are making. I agree with your point that, in fact, the state enterprises have abused their position to take out the interest clause. And we all know about that, yes? And that has resulted in tremendous unfairness to the industry. And in fact, effectively, the industry is financing the country's development process, yes? Because the contractors have to hold straight and wait for the money. That has now, that unfairness has manifested. That size matters has manifested in that unfairness, the removal of the interest clause. The removal of the interest clause has had a tremendous impact on contractors, and contractors have equally have to charge a price to compensate themselves for that. So in fact, the country has not benefited from the learning of Bala. But let us come forward a bit more in the story. So that's the '82 reference to 2023 discussion. Let's come forward a little closer. And you can recognize that the Uff Report, the 91 recommendations, and I'll say it very plainly, you all have been very coy and gentlemanly, they have not been implemented. Mrs. Persad de Silva, Dr. Rowley, they haven't been implemented. The committee Dr. Rowley was supposed to set up, it was never set up. Mrs. Persad de Silva had set up a construction oversight committee sort of thing. The meetings fell apart. That was under Jack Warner. I used to be part of JCC at the time. It didn't happen. Okay, the recommendations have not been implemented. In 2013, I accused Unicot about Invaders Bay of lying about the question about all of the recommendations have been implemented. Unicot was making that statement in a press release, and I said that's not true. That's not true at all. And I gave the example of Invaders Bay, where recommendation number 17 about consultation had been breached. They put out a full-page advertisement about me. I hit them at a letter to the editor the next week. Everybody got quiet. That time, Jolene John was there. Now there's Noel Garcia there. It still haven't been implemented. And the last point I want to make, because Derek, you and Don made the point about 4 large state agencies that effectively drive the construction process in the whole country. And that would probably be HTC and NIPCO and Unicot. And I forget who the 4th one is. Maybe it's EMBD. Okay, maybe I got the 4 right, 4 out of 4. But anyway, so you talked about 4 agencies that do those things. And I have a partner, and I don't know my partner to be a thief or anything so. He's older than me, the fellow I know for a long time, 25 years. He's an attorney, a respectable professional man. He's not any flag waving PNM. But about 5 or 6 years ago, he was put on a board of one of those 4 companies. I wouldn't say which one of those 4. And he used to come to the office and see me now and again and discuss things, the way you do in Trinidad, and chat and so on and so on. And one day talking with him, we were wrangling on a point. It might have been about something. It wasn't a project in his agency. Something else was happening. We were wrangling on a point, back and forth. And I realized to my horror, like when your whole skin started to crawl, I said to him, but Mike, do you mean to tell me a senior attorney like you, you're over 25 years at the bar, a top professional man, don't you any business, you live in the same house for 30 years. You have teeth, no money, no big car, nothing. You're on a state board now. And the board looking to you for guidance. You've never read the Uff Report? He had never read it. So this could give you an explanation of what it is we're fighting with. We're fighting with a post-reading culture. People don't read. They don't want to read. They don't wish to be informed. This is what we're fighting with. Eh? And you're not going to be able to take a target against the enemy unless you actually understand what the enemy is. Eh? And this partner of mine, I said to him, that is nonsense. And I got my secretary to print out the whole of the Uff Report. And I highlighted, you know, the 91 recommendations, I highlighted parts with tabs. And I give it to him and I said, and we used to talk, eh? We used to talk. And it's one of the biggest agencies with some huge controversial projects. And he went down there and he started to think. And about 2 weeks time, they removed him. He got a letter saying they thanked him for his services. It wasn't any scene, they didn't fire him, and they sent a letter to his house and they thanked him for his services. Because he started to go in the meeting, informed, to say that number 56 of says this. How does this relate to what we're doing here? Which is what I was trying to coach him. But so the struggle remains. I'm not going to stop. So colleagues, you all have done a very good piece of work this evening, this afternoon. And that's all I'd like to say. It's not really a question.
Thank you, Afra. I've actually just been reminded by Kamla that we do actually have until 3:30. My mistake, my apologies on that. So if there are any other questions, please come forward. Looking back through the notes I made as we were going along today, this is a people industry. We need value for money. We need experience, but there is a reticence to come forward. How do we overcome that reticence? What are we going to do to make this a better industry? We've talked about different parts of the Uff Report, but let's talk, if we can, for a few minutes about the professional institutions. Let's revisit that. Who wants to kick off? Don, do you want to go first? How are the professional institutions? How are the professional institutions going to engage with academia to improve the industry?
You know, it's very hard to follow a man like Afra, but I will try my best.
He's gone offline now. So
I know, I saw that. But I will say this, what he's talking about, what Derek has talked about, what Adesh has talked about, there's a simple solution. We don't need to find a solution now, we know the solution. And here's what the solution is. You see what he spoke about where his friend went into the board and started making recommendations and they removed him? This is part of a bigger problem in the industry. And I can talk from personal experience. I can tell you that many years ago, and this is actually was the trigger from a PhD, so I'm just going to give you a story to answer that question. I was asked to we call swing attending evaluation. In other words, I made a recommendation, and then they said, here's what you need to change it to this person. And the person didn't have the equipment or anything, and my former boss started to persecute me in the organization. I had to get a lawyer involved and so on. And then I left the organization. But what happened after I left is that the organization became better. It takes a certain level of courage to stand up for what is right. So the question that I asked, John, which is, what do we need to do now? Because then if we don't figure out in this session what we need to do now, then this session has become a talk shop, and we don't want to be a talk shop. What we need to do now is that every person, there are 34 persons in this session, I think, needs to go out there and says, here's what. This is right, this is wrong, within the confines of the law and the regulations that you have to follow. And this is what we need to do to advocate, even if it is at some points, sometimes to a personal benefit, because I can tell you, I've lived it. The industry, I think I've said this in other forums with both Derek and Adesh. If we continue not advocating for the procurement legislation for our construction industry, we will have no industry. And if we have no industry, what will happen invariably is that the government will say, okay, we have no industry, so we need to bring in foreign contractors. And we will have no industry. If we don't have any industry, there is no data to generate for research. So the university faculties of engineering in both UTT and UE will shut down because we have no industry. They depend on the industry for students. As Derek talked about also, the satellite industries that go along with this industry, the next to energy, the construction industry is a big economy driver. So you will have, your economy will not flourish. Energy can't be the sustainer forever. That is one of the economic drivers. But there's another one, which is construction. So what do we need to do now? We need to get institutions like CCGI, which are already doing it. We need to get institutions like, and I'm going to say boldface here, as I say, APET, Contractors Association. I know they did some advocacy. We need to get them to come together in the JCC to actively tell the government of the day, whether it's this government or the next, or whoever it is, we need to stand up and say, this is what we need to do to correct the situation. Because you think about what is the potential for the money we lost in corruption in the last 30 years, and how much that could have been done to fix our hospital and so on. Some people say I'm going political, but this is the truth. This is the truth of the matter. I always tell people this all the time, project management is not the management of projects. Project management is the management of people. So if you're going to manage people, and in this generation coming, we need to save the whole industry by influencing and advocating. That is what we need to do, in my respectful view, to correct the situation. And if we can't stand up as an industry and do that together, and we advocate in every forum, we keep on advocating, right? When I just going to say this last thing, because I know I want to be respectful to give Derek and Adesh a final viewpoint as well. When I started advocating in November, I think it was September, I remember how the social media comments used to go, a very funny acronym. Somebody say, hey, this Don Samuel, PhD means pothole doctor. I thought it was quite funny, right? I actually like that acronym. So, but now if you watch the comments, it has changed. And now the minister, and I'm not taking this by myself, Derek has advocated, so has Adesh, so has many others, Construction Management Institute. So when we started advocating, people were laughing. Now people are getting serious. Now the ministers are also listening in. But we have to keep it going. You have to keep on advocating and advocating until we get it changed. And we already know the solutions to all our problems. We just need to implement it and ensure it's implemented. So that'll be my final comment there. Respectful of the time there, John.
Thank you indeed, Don. Derek, people need to speak up more. Do they need more protection when they're speaking up?
Yes, I agree, but I don't know how to give them it. You know, I can tell you that Uff did make certain pronouncements. There were about 11 of the 91 recommendations. The action item is that government needs to have its own form of contract, similar to like what you have in the UK, the government works contract. You know, if they want to look at and say for the industry to take certain risk, and the industry should be participating in the development of any government works contract, you know, and that is missing. It hasn't happened since 2010. With I don't know any committee or anything that is drafting a government works contract for both building and civil engineering works, you know, and Afra did talk about some tender rules and so forth. Yes, Uff did make some recommendations for standard tender rules to be drafted, and that was supposed to happen with the procurement legislation. It hasn't been proclaimed, you know, and there was very little. Uff did speak of corruption, you know, in about 8 of the conditions. I've had 2 pieces of research done by master's students on irregularities and corruption. None of them wanted to publish the work for fear of victimization, but it's quite an eye-opener when you understand the level of corruption that is in our construction industry. And that I can't go into that today. That has to be something else, but it's unbelievable the percentage in which contractors, you know, and other participants in the industry have said that they have actually done corrupt things. You know, this comes up because of the protection of the anonymous aspect of the questionnaires and so forth. But it's, you know, listen, John, we've addressed the Uff Commission of Inquiry in academia. We have about 400 project managers that pass through that course. The course requires a cooperation between the industry and academia in order to get its accreditation. And so practitioners are well aware of what we do, you know, from the professional organization, because it's members of the professional organizations that attend, and I mean people who sit on the boards of these professional organizations, not the ordinary members, who attend, participate in the examination process, participate in examining theses, you know, participate in recommending improvements of the curriculum and in the course, you know, right? All of the students are taught ethics and morality, right up from BSc all the way, all the engineering students that we have in the civil and environmental department, they go out there with that, you know, right? It's not that they don't know it. So there's no, to say that, you know, the academia and the profession are apart. No, they're not. The profession knows exactly what we're doing in academia, you know, right? But the thing is, there is no will, you know. There's no will because, like I say, if you have a monopoly, why would you change that? If I could dictate how things are to be done and I must be the master in dictating it, then why would I give up that power? And I'd stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, Adesh, I'm going to make you the president of the JCC for the next 2 minutes. How are you going to change the industry? Are you going to use social media as a platform? Are you going to use government lobbying as a platform? How are you going to get over this reluctance to speak because of the fear of potential reprisals or mockery or whatever you wish to call it?
Well, let me give you a personal experience I have. My wife is also a civil engineer. She worked for a state enterprise. And in that state enterprise, she observed some irregular practices and she spoke out about it. And she actually went to the anti-corruption squad and gave evidence about what she observed. And she ended up getting terminated from a job. She called me a morning and said, "Hey, you have to come pick me up." The armed security guard escorted her out of the building. And my wife was like just over 5 feet tall. What you need an armed security guard to take out the building for? But because she basically spoke out. And I mean, we look at this whistleblower protection act. It's still in the bill stage. It hasn't been proclaimed yet. I mean, we're basically sitting down on that. There's why if we actually get this whistleblower protection act proclaimed by the president and it becomes law, then people will have some level of protection, and they may speak out. I mean, Mr. Outridge had indicated that there's a course in UE on ethics and morality. I mean, right now I'm beating my brains out to see did I have any kind of course like that when I was in university in the early 90s, and I already can't recall. It's good that there's a course on that, but what is a bit disappointing is that when I read about what's going on in some of these state enterprises and the corruption and who is involved, and you see these young engineers, I'm a bit disappointed. And why is it they're getting involved in that? Is it they just succumbing to the pressure from their superiors, and that if they speak out, if they say, well, no, I'm not signing that payment certificate, they have to pay for the job or pay for, as I think Don was saying, he some sort of retaliation from your supervisor. So I think one of the first things as the JCC I would push for is to get this whistleblower protection act proclaimed. But is it still in the bill stage? I mean, I think it's 2022. because up to last year, this thing has been discussed, but we haven't moved forward. It hasn't become law. So that's one thing we need to get. In terms of again, yeah, it comes back to the government lobbying. Get this Whistleblower Protection Act. Let it become law and let people who observe these irregularities in procurement or execution, let them not fear for the job if they speak out. Again, when we have these things in place, the people who would tend to want to do the incorrect things, follow incorrect or do their own thing and not follow the established procedures, they will know that there is some repercussion for their actions, and it comes back to again accountability. As President JCC had pushed for ensuring that these key performance indicators on state enterprises has been implemented. These boards need to be held accountable for in terms of how they're spending the taxpayers funds. Accountability. I think Mr. Outridge kind of went all out on accountability. I think that's something that we need to get established in the industry from the employer, the consultant, the contractors. Everybody has to be accountable for their actions. I mean, so again, that's something I would want to push for. I think what else could we push for? In terms of as the president of JCC, I need to make sure in terms of quality. We need to, and it comes back to the recommendation number 2. Management role should be for my only experienced persons. Should be for experienced persons. Let me give a simple example of if you don't know how you can be taken advantage of. Something like concrete. We have a lot of work where we're doing concrete work. When you're taking a concrete sample, you can take either, I mean, if you follow European or British codes, it's cube samples. Typically, if it's the American codes, it's our IBC, ICI is cylinders. For the same class of concrete, if you test a cube sample and a cylindrical sample, the cube sample will give a higher compressive strength. I have seen in a state enterprise was managing a construction project being done under the FIDIC Yellow Book. I mean, that's where the contractor is responsible for design. The contractor indicated what his design codes that he follows, the American code of practice, and he indicated that the concrete strength was supposed to be 30 megapascals at 28 days. And yet if it's the American Concrete Institute, ACI 318 or whatever code of practice he followed for reinforced concrete, it's supposed to be taking out cylindrical samples. Yet he took cube samples, submitted those results to the employer, because the employer was basically overseeing the construction, and the concrete cube strength showed 30, but really if it was a cylinder being taken, that would be below 30 megapascals. And we and they accepted that, and this is an educational institute that was being constructed. And again, we need to ensure that the management roles are the employer, the consultant, and the contractor, that we have the experienced persons. And as the JCC, I would push for the professional organizations within the JCC to hold workshops for their own members to disseminate information which would make them better equipped to execute their projects. That's something again I would push for. I think that's about it in terms of what I can think off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that when you take back over, I'll probably have some more things to say. But off the top of my head, that's basically what I would kind of push for right now.
I think you've just presented an excellent platform for being the next leader of the JCC. I would like to pass across to Don, and I'll make this the last one before closing. Don, what support do you need as an industry lobbyist, for want of a better word, to get the message across to the public, to make the industry listen to your message?
Great question. I think the first thing we need to do is have some sort of education drive, and certainly sessions like this would help, but who is it reaching? As I said before, I saw 32, 36 people in this session. Hey, that's good. But how do we reach the wider population? I mean, I don't want to put Kamla on the spot by saying, well, do we share this video? I mean, it's a nation building video, and as I say in the video, nation building seminar, sorry. But I'll leave it up to that prerogative for the CCGI. But in terms of support, I think the industry needs to stand up behind advocates. Not just myself, Adesh, Derek, Afra. I'm horrified a little bit by Adesh's story that I didn't know, because I know Adesh, I know his wife, and I'm horrified that she stood up and she was victimized. And if I were to share a story now, which I wouldn't, I understand exactly what she went through, right? So this is not funny. We can't have people being victimized. And then here's what they do. When you advocate, what do? Do they stay in the country? No, they leave the country. Now you're having a brain drain of your bright and intelligent people. So that's one. What support do I need? What we all need? We need the industry. And I'm going to put it a little bit raw like Afra. We need to stop looking at egos. We need to stop looking at whether Don is a clown. We need to stop looking at all these things. You don't have to like me. But we need to come to a common position as to why are we all saying what we say. Some people we are so polarized in this country right now that we can't see past the political state of the day. We need to mature as a people and say, hey, this is not right for our country. Whether what political party you come from, nobody enjoys driving on roads with potholes. I can guarantee you that. No one. So we need to stand up and say, this is what we need for the country. Nobody enjoys, for example, not getting water when they come. Procurement, governance, which CCGI is also advocating for, affects every single facet in this country. It affects everything, the acquisition of all goods, infrastructure, and so on. So what support do we need? We need to educate the public. So we don't need to educate what you call the technical people, because the technical people in this session, they understand everything we say. We need to go out there and find a way to bridge it to the people who are not technical. How do we reach the man on the street and say, listen, man, we are the experts, you are the armchair expert. How do we, and that is a serious thing, because you saw it during COVID, where the armchair experts were influencers in the society as compared to the actual experts. This is another challenge that we have. How do we convince persons to listen to experts like Derek, Adesh, Afra, John Dowse, Kamla, whoever, or all the persons in this Zoom room? Because that is something you're going to wrestle with. You're going to wrestle with so how do we now use social media to advocate? So the support I would need as a lobbyist, and I see Darren is agreeing in the chat. The support I would need as a lobbyist is we need to get the industry behind us and force the government. And I don't know if you could do it a respectful way. We don't need to quarrel and go and protest. But maybe I don't know if that is what it will come to. We need to advocate for the government. Stop treating us like any government. And I say that openly. Any government. Stop treating us like idiots and understand. We understand the situation. Listen to your experts. I don't know everything. Sorry, I don't know anything much about the geotechnical side of engineering. That is Adesh's strength. Derek's strength is contracting, quantity surveying, and plenty others, which if I call it up, we'll be here until 4 o'clock. So we need to respect that. And lastly, what we need to do is ensure that we have the right people in the right positions, making the right decision at the right time. I'm closing with that.
Well, I would like to say thank you to the participants today, to Adesh, to Don, to Derek. I think the discussions have been insightful, probing, necessary even. I would also like to thank Kamla and the CCGI for the opportunity of moderating this. And I do sincerely hope that those from the industry who have been listening today will take on board the comments of the panelists and those who've participated by asking questions, and that together we can learn from that we can move forward and develop a better industry, a better economy, and a better country overall. Kamla, thank you again, and back to you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Adesh. This really was a very, very good panel discussion. So I thank you all for being so candid, so honest, for sharing of your years of experience, of your thoughts, because I agree with you, Don, it's all about nation building. We are here trying to help build a better society, and I'm so grateful to all of you who have taken your time to be here with us and to prepare for this meeting. I want to say thank you to the participants as well. It's wonderful to see that persons logged in from as early as 12:30, and almost everyone has stayed the course. It demonstrates that, you know, there is great interest and there's a great commitment to wanting to see improvement in the sector. I want to remind persons, please, it is important we get your feedback. So please make sure you click on the link. I know many of you have enjoyed the session. Do tell us that formally, because that is the data and evidence. That's important. We don't just want anecdotal information. It's important that we work with evidence in many respects. So please make sure you click on the link and give us your feedback as well. We are all here trying to do the best that we can to help build a better society. So I appreciate the contribution of everyone. So again, sincerely, thank you, John. And I apologize for giving you my cough. Many thanks to you, Mr. Derek Outridge. Sincerely, thank you, Dr. Don Samuel. Appreciate it. And Mr. Adesh Surujnath. Excellent, excellent work that all of you have done today. So I wish you all a wonderful evening. I invite everyone to stay connected with us. Join us here at CCGI. I see Mr. Surujnath may very well become JCC president as well. So all these organizations also have very important roles, but we definitely here at the Governance Institute are playing our part to help bring people together, push the conversation forward so that we are all trying to ensure that we build a better nation for all of us. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.